the observation post. The monitoring station hung in the darkness beyond Neptune's orbit, invisible to human telescopes. Inside, Senior Observer Kelthrix adjusted his sensory array for the 1000th time that cycle, his 4 eyes tracking the feed from Earth with practiced detachment. Another conflict, his assistant Vrain noted, her tone carrying the clinical interest of a xenobiologist watching ants. The humans call this one World War II. Kelthrix made a notation in the Galactic Archive. Fascinating. They've progressed from chemical weapons to atomic fission in less than 3 decades. Mark this under Aggressive Species Development Pattern Gamma 7. The observation post had monitored Earth for 2,000 rotations. The Galactic Council had classified humanity as a Category 4 civilization, technologically primitive, socially fractured, but possessing enough curiosity to eventually discover faster-than-light travel. The standing protocol was clear. Observe, record, and prevent contact until they either destroyed themselves or matured enough for integration as a minor client species. Should we intervene? Vrain asked, watching mushroom clouds bloom over human cities on her display. Negative. Protocol forbids interference. If they survive this phase, we'll reassess in another 1,000 rotations. Kelthrix filed the report with the same boredom he'd felt filing 10,000 others. Earth was just another data point in the Council's endless catalogs. What neither observer noticed was the tiny satellite that had just passed within scanning range of their cloaked station. The humans called it Voyager. And buried in its primitive electronics was something the Council's sensors couldn't detect. Not technology, but potential. Across the galaxy, in the Council's crystal amphitheater on the capital world of Nexera, High Arbiter Salanth reviewed Kelthrix's latest report with one of her 8 manipulator appendages. Earth status? A junior counselor inquired. Unchanged. Violent, divided, prone to self-destruction. Standard observation protocols remain in effect. They should make adequate factory workers if they survive their nuclear phase. Salanth dismissed the report with a gesture that conveyed complete disinterest. But on Earth, a mathematician named Dara Okonkwo was writing equations that shouldn't have been possible for another 5 centuries. In Beijing, an engineer named Qin Wei was sketching designs for a propulsion system that violated everything the Council thought primitive species could conceive. And in a small laboratory in Mumbai, physicist Ravi Sharma was discovering something the Council had deliberately hidden from younger species: the fracture points in spacetime itself. The galaxy had been watching humanity for generations, never suspecting that perhaps, just perhaps, humanity had been watching back. First contact. 73 years after Kelthrix filed his dismissive report, the observation post detected something impossible. Alert status. Vrain shouted, her calm demeanor shattered. Human vessel approaching at superluminal velocity. This cannot be real. Kelthrix's eyes widened in genuine shock. The ship was crude, its hull still bearing the marks of atmospheric construction, but it was traveling at warp 7. Humanity had jumped from chemical rockets to faster-than-light travel in less than a century, an achievement that should have taken them a millennium. The human vessel, christened the Pathfinder, slowed to subliminal speeds directly in front of the observation post. Its primitive scanners swept across the station, and Kelthrix realized with growing horror that their cloaking field was useless. The humans had found them. Captain Zara Okafor's voice crackled across the communication channels in broken but understandable galactic common. Unknown station, this is the Earth vessel Pathfinder. We know you've been watching us. We're here to talk. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session within the hour. Holographic representatives from 73 species materialized in the amphitheater, all speaking at once in a cacophony of alarm. High Arbiter Salanth, now ancient and nearing her final molting, called for silence. How did they achieve this? Observer Kelthrix, explain. Kelthrix's image flickered with distress signals. High Arbiter, I cannot. By all projections, Earth should still be confined to their home system. They were scheduled for first contact consideration in another 900 rotations. A Vrelnian ambassador, resembling a crystalline spider, spoke up. They must have stolen the technology. It's the only explanation. Humans are clever mimics, nothing more. But Ambassador Torin Vel of the Karks Collective, a species that resembled bipedal lions with silver fur, shook his massive head. I reviewed the observation logs. No other species visited Earth. They developed this independently. Impossible, Salanth declared. Deploy the assessment fleet. If they developed warp technology this quickly, we need to determine if they pose a threat to Council stability. Within days, 24 Council ships surrounded Earth's solar system. The humans, rather than showing fear, sent out a diplomatic convoy of 7 ships. They were outgunned 100 to 1, but their transmissions carried no trace of submission. Zara Okafor stood on the bridge of the Pathfinder as they approached the Council flagship. Her crew of 47 humans represented every continent, every culture, united in a way the Council had never seen a species unite before. "Captain," her communications officer Marcus Reeves called out, "they're hailing us. The translation matrix is calling them the Galactic Council. Looks like we just met the Neighborhood Association." Zara allowed herself a slight smile. "Let's hope they're friendlier than the last homeowners association I dealt with. Open a channel." High Arbiter Salantha's image filled the view screen, imposing and regal. "Humans of Earth, I am High Arbiter Salanth of the Galactic Council. Your development of superluminal technology has triggered first contact protocols. You will submit to Council assessment and integration as a probationary member species. Your status will be determined based on—" "With respect, High Arbiter," Zara interrupted calmly, "we're not here to submit. We're here to introduce ourselves as equals and discuss mutual diplomatic relations." The silence that followed was absolute. In 10,000 years of Council history, no newly contacted species had ever spoken those words. The assessment. The Council assessment team arrived on Earth 3 weeks later, led by Evaluator Mrixtal, a being whose species had served the Council for 6 millennia. His people, the Nethrin, were renowned for their impartiality and their ability to categorize civilizations with perfect accuracy. Mrixtal expected another backward world of primitives who'd stumbled onto dangerous technology. What he found shook his understanding of galactic order. The team landed in Geneva, where humanity had constructed a massive diplomatic complex in record time. As Mrixtal descended the ramp of his vessel, he was greeted by Director Amara Nkosi, humanity's chosen representative, a woman with warm brown skin, intelligent eyes, and a smile that seemed to see right through him. "Welcome to Earth, Evaluator Mrixtal," Amara said in flawless galactic common. "We're honored to host you. You learned our language in 3 weeks?" Mrixtal asked, genuinely surprised. "We had motivated learners," Amara replied. "But we're more interested in learning about you. The Council has been watching us for 2,000 years. We think it's time we understood who our neighbors really are." Over the following months, Mrixtal conducted standard assessments. He tested human technology, examined their social structures, reviewed their history. But with each evaluation, his certainty crumbled. The humans had developed quantum entanglement communication independently. They'd created medical nanites that the Council had taken 3 species working together to design. Their artificial intelligence systems operated on principles Mrixtal didn't fully understand, yet somehow didn't violate the Council's strict prohibitions on synthetic sentience. "Impossible," he muttered, reviewing the data in his temporary office. His assistant, a younger Nethrin named Yix, looked over his shoulder. "Perhaps our models are wrong," Yix suggested carefully. "The models have categorized 3,000 species over 10 millennia," Mrixtal snapped. "They are not wrong." But he couldn't shake his doubt. The breaking point came during a visit to the human colony on Mars. Humanity had established a self-sustaining city of 50,000 in the 12 years since they developed warp technology. The Council's fastest colonization had taken a species 40 years to achieve the same. Mrixtal walked through the domed city with Director Nkosi, watching humans of every shade and culture working together with seamless coordination. "How do you maintain cohesion?" he asked. "Your species has hundreds of subgroups, thousands of cultural variations. Council species typically require centuries of post-contact unification." Amara paused beside a viewing window overlooking the rust-colored surface. "We almost destroyed ourselves, Evaluator. Multiple times. But we learned something from standing at the edge of extinction. Our differences make us stronger, not weaker. A problem that stumps one culture might have an obvious solution in another." "The Council does not operate this way," Mrixtal admitted. "I've noticed." Amara turned to face him directly. "Your Council assigns roles based on aptitude assessments. The Vrelnians mine, the Karks enforce, the Nethrin evaluate. It's efficient. Yes. It's also stagnant." Amara's words were gentle but cutting. "When was the last time the Council made a significant technological breakthrough?" Mrixtal calculated. "Approximately 1,700 rotations. In human years, that's 3,400 years." Amara let that sink in. "We've gone from radio to faster-than-light travel in 1 century. Not because we're smarter than you, we're probably not. But because we don't limit ourselves to predetermined roles. That night, Mrixtal composed his report to the council. His manipulators trembled as he wrote the conclusion. Humanity represents a paradigm violation. Recommend immediate elevation to full council status with advisory privileges. This species has the potential to reshape galactic civilization. He submitted the report knowing it would likely end his career. The council did not like being told they were wrong. High Arbiter Salanth read the report 3 times, each reading increasing her distress. Finally, she convened a closed session of the council's inner circle, the 7 eldest species who truly controlled galactic policy. Mrixtal has lost his objectivity, declared Speaker Varn of the Vrelnians. Humans have clearly employed some form of psychological manipulation. But Torin Vel, representing the Karks, growled his disagreement. I reviewed his data. Every measurement is accurate. The humans have achieved in decades what takes us centuries. Then they are dangerous, Salanth said quietly. A species that develops this quickly, that refuses to accept assigned roles, they could destabilize everything we've built. Or, Torin suggested, they could save us from our own stagnation. The vote was called. 4 voices for restricting humanity to vassal status. 3 for elevation. A tie meant delay, and in galactic politics delay meant opportunities. On Earth, Amar and Kosi received the council's response with a knowing smile. They were afraid. Good. Fear meant respect, and respect meant humanity would have a chance to prove themselves. Assemble the delegation, she told her staff. If they won't invite us to the table, we'll build our own. The fracture. The galactic status quo began to crack 6 months after Mrixtal's report, and the fissure started in an unexpected place, the mining colonies of Vraxo 7. The Vrelnian miners had worked the asteroid fields for 600 years, extracting rare minerals under contracts that barely paid subsistence wages. It was the role the council had assigned them, and they'd accepted it as the natural order. But then a human trade vessel called the Prosperity arrived with an unusual offer. Captain Dmitry Volkov, a bear of a man with a salt and pepper beard, met with the mine supervisor, a Vrelnian named Kel9. The spider-like being regarded him with multiple crystalline eyes full of suspicion. The council forbids direct trade with unestablished species, Kel9 said, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into galactic common. Then it's a good thing we're here unofficially, Dmitry replied with a grin. We're offering autonomous mining drones. You program them, they do the dangerous extraction work, and your people can focus on processing and management. We're not asking for money, just a small percentage of increased productivity and a friendship treaty. Why would you help us? Because back on Earth, we learned that a rising tide lifts all boats. Dmitry pulled up holographic schematics. Besides, we humans need trading partners who aren't going to treat us like children. The council's been condescending. Within 3 months, Vrelnian productivity increased by 300%. The miners had time to rest, to create, to innovate. More importantly, they started asking questions about why they'd accepted such poor conditions for so long. The council noticed. High Arbiter Salanth dispatched a delegation to investigate, but by then the humans had already moved on to their next project. On the agricultural world of Harvest Prime, human botanist Dr. Yuki Tanaka introduced crop rotation techniques and genetic modifications that doubled yield while reducing water consumption by 60%. The Harvest Prime inhabitants, a peaceful species called the Melnari, had lived in a perpetual state of near famine under council management for generations. The council provides what we need, insisted Overseer Pell, though his species' thin frames told a different story. The council provides the minimum to keep you working their assigned role, Yuki countered gently. You're farmers, yes, but you're also poets, artists, engineers. We've read your old texts. Before the council made contact, your people built floating cities and wrote symphonies that could move mountains. What happened? Pell's bioluminescent skin flickered with an emotion translator couldn't capture. The council said our artistic pursuits were inefficient. That we should focus on our natural aptitude for agriculture. On Earth we have a saying, humans don't live by bread alone. Yuki smiled softly. Let us help you feed your people properly. Then you can decide what else you want to be. Ambassador Torin Vel watched these developments with growing interest from his post on the council flagship. Unlike his colleagues, he saw opportunity rather than threat. The Karks had served as the council's enforcers for millennia, but Torin had always suspected there was more to life than following orders. He arranged a private meeting with Amar Nkosi at a neutral station in the Kepler sector. Director Nkosi, he greeted her, his leonine features arranged in what humans would recognize as a smile. Your people are making waves. We're making friends, Amara corrected. There's a difference. The Council sees sedition. They're preparing sanctions against Earth. Torin's expression grew serious. I'm here to warn you, and to ask for your help. Amara leaned forward. What kind of help? My people, the Karks, were warriors. It's all we've been allowed to be for 3,000 years. But before the Council found us, we were also philosophers, explorers, teachers. I've read your human history. You had warriors who were also poets. Soldiers who became peacemakers. His amber eyes held hers. Can you teach us to be more than weapons? We can teach you to remember what you already were, Amara said. But it won't be easy. The Council won't like it. The Council, Torin said quietly, is afraid of change because they've forgotten how to grow. They maintain order through stagnation. You humans, your chaos and creativity. You're exactly what the galaxy needs. Or exactly what it fears, Amara added. Perhaps both. Torin extended a massive paw. Will you help us? Amara shook his hand, the gesture feeling momentous. On one condition, this isn't about Earth leading. It's about all of us moving forward together. Agreed. As Torin departed, Amara's assistant, a young man named Jamal Foster, approached with concern evident on his face. Ma'am, we're playing with fire here. If the Council sees this as a rebellion. They already do, Amara interrupted. The question is whether we can show them a better way before they try to crush us. Back on Nexera, High Arbiter Salanth convened an emergency session. Her 8 appendages trembled with age and rage as she addressed the assembly. The humans are systematically destabilizing Council order, she declared. They spread dissent like a plague, convincing vassal species to exceed their designated roles. This cannot stand. Speaker Varn of the Vrelnians agreed. They've turned my people's miners into entrepreneurs. It's unnatural. But others weren't so sure. The representative from Harvest Prime, Overseer Pell, stood to speak for the first time in his species' 300 years on the Council. With respect, High Arbiter, my people have not eaten this well in 6 generations. Is that destabilization or is that growth? It's disruption of the natural order. Salanth snapped. Perhaps, Pell replied softly, his bioluminescence pulsing with newfound confidence. The natural order needed disrupting. The chamber erupted in arguments. For the first time in millennia, the Council was divided. And at the heart of the division was a simple question. Should the galaxy remain as it had been, or dare to become something more? High Arbiter Salanth watched the chaos and realized with cold certainty that she would have to make an example of humanity. Order demanded it. Her reign demanded it. But she failed to notice that in the galleries above, younger members of dozens of species watched with hungry eyes, seeing for the first time that the Council's word was not absolute. The fracture had become a chasm and humanity stood at its edge, offering hands to anyone brave enough to jump. The ultimatum. The message arrived simultaneously across every human colony, every Earth government, and every human vessel in explored space. High Arbiter Salantha's image materialized with the weight of 10,000 years of authority behind her ancient eyes. Humans of Earth, her voice resonated with controlled fury, by order of the Galactic Council, you are hereby commanded to cease all independent contact with Council vassal species. Your unsanctioned trade agreements are void. Your technological transfers are classified as illegal interference. You have 30 standard cycles to comply with integration protocols and accept your assigned role within the Council structure. She paused, letting the silence carry its own threat. Failure to comply will result in the implementation of quarantine protocols. Earth and all human colonies will be isolated from galactic civilization indefinitely. Your warp-capable vessels will be disabled. Your communication networks will be severed. You will have chosen isolation. The transmission ended. In the Geneva headquarters, Director Amaran Kosi gathered her advisory council, representatives from every inhabited continent and colony. The room hummed with tension. They're trying to box us in, said Dmitry Volkov via hologram from his ship. Accept servitude or face exile. It's worse than that, Dr. Yuki Tanaka added. They're terrified. A scared authority is a dangerous one. Amara studied the faces around her, physical and holographic, and saw determination rather than fear. We need to understand what we're really facing. How many Council species are actually loyal to Salanth? Her intelligence officer, Commander Elena Martinez, pulled up data streams. That's the interesting part, Director. Our contacts indicate only about 40% of Council species actively support the ultimatum. Another 30% are neutral. The remaining 30% are quietly sympathetic to our position. A divided house, murmured Minister Chinwei, the elderly engineer who'd helped design humanity's first warp drive. Salanth is trying to force unity through threats. Then we need to force the issue before she can consolidate power, Amara decided. Commander Martinez, send encrypted messages to our allies. Ambassador Vel, the Vrelnian miners, the Melnari farmers, everyone who's benefited from partnership. It's time to call in those friendships. And if the Council retaliates? Asked General Marcus Stone, Earth's highest-ranking military officer. Amara met his gaze steadily. Then we show them that humanity didn't survive 2 world wars and nuclear standoffs by backing down from bullies. But we do it smart. We don't fight unless we absolutely have to. Across the galaxy, responses to the ultimatum varied dramatically. On Vraxos 7, the Vrelnian miners held an unprecedented assembly. Kel 9, who'd been transformed from subsistence miner to prosperous independent contractor, addressed thousands of his people. The Council demands we sever ties with the humans. They say humanity disrupts the natural order. His crystalline carapace gleamed under the asteroid base's lights. I ask you, what is more natural? Centuries of poverty under Council contracts, or the prosperity we've built in 6 months of partnership? The vote was unanimous. The miners would stand with humanity. On Harvest Prime, Overseer Pell faced a Council enforcer ship in orbit. The Kark's captain, following orders, demanded the Melnari expel all human advisors immediately. I understand your orders, Pell responded calmly, his bioluminescence steady. But I must respectfully decline. My people are fed. Our children are healthy. Our artists create freely. If the Council believes this is a crime, then the Council is wrong. The Kark's captain, a female warrior named Shira, felt something she hadn't experienced in her 2 centuries of service: doubt. She'd been trained to follow orders without question. But she'd also been taught that Kark's warriors protected the innocent, and the Melnari she saw below didn't look like criminals. They looked happy. I will report your non-compliance, Shira said finally, but her heart wasn't in the threat. Ambassador Torin Vel took the greatest risk of all. He stood before the full Council and formally declared his opposition to the ultimatum. High Arbiter, honored members, I speak not as a dissenter, but as a servant of galactic peace, he began, his powerful voice carrying through the amphitheater. The humans have broken no laws. They have offered friendship and advancement. If we punish innovation and mutual cooperation, what message do we send to the galaxy? We send the message that order matters more than chaos, Salanth replied coldly. You exceed your authority, Ambassador Vel. Then I resign my ambassadorship. Torin's words fell like hammer blows. I will not enforce tyranny in the name of order. The Council chamber erupted. Never in recorded history had a senior ambassador resigned in protest. It was unthinkable, impossible, yet it was happening. Salanth's appendages trembled. You are stripped of rank and honors. Guards, remove him. But the guards, Kark's warriors themselves, hesitated. Their commander, Captain Shira, had just transmitted her own report from Harvest Prime, questioning the wisdom of the ultimatum. Torin Vel was a legend among their people. To see him treated as a criminal shook their certainty. In that moment of hesitation, everything changed. High Arbiter, spoke a voice that hadn't been heard in Council chambers for 500 years. Elder Mrixtal, the evaluator who'd first assessed humanity, stepped forward. I invoke the right of archive appeal. The humans were never properly classified. My evaluation recommended partnership status. That recommendation was ignored, not rejected. Under Council law, the ultimatum is premature. Salanth's eyes narrowed. You dare challenge Council authority with legal technicalities? I dare challenge injustice with law, Mrixtal replied. The humans deserve a full hearing, not an ultimatum. The chamber descended into chaos. Species representatives shouted arguments. Alliance blocks fractured. The unified front Salanth had tried to project crumbled before her eyes. On Earth, Amara watched the Council feed with a slight smile. They're not ready for this conversation yet, she told her team. But they're having it anyway. That's progress. What do we do now? Asked Jamal Foster. We wait, Amara said. And we prepare. Because when an old order falls, someone needs to be ready to help build what comes next. But in the shadows of the Council flagship, High Arbiter Salanth made a darker decision. If law and intimidation wouldn't work, perhaps force would. She activated a private channel to the Council's military command, A fleet that hadn't seen real action in 1,000 years but still possessed weapons capable of cracking planets. "Prepare the armada," she ordered. "If humanity wants to lead a rebellion, they'll learn what happens to rebels." The galaxy teetered on the edge of its first major war in millennia, and at the center of the storm stood a species that had existed in space for less than a century. But humanity had learned long ago that being right didn't mean being safe, it meant being ready to fight for what mattered. The breaking point. The Council Armada gathered at the edge of the Sol system, 300 warships representing the accumulated military might of galactic civilization. On the bridge of the flagship Eternal Order, Fleet Commander Zelmoth reviewed tactical displays with the cold precision of a being bred for warfare. "High Arbiter Salanth has authorized us to disable human vessels and infrastructure," he announced to his officers. "We will demonstrate overwhelming force, destroy their military capability, and enforce mandatory integration. Any species that interferes will face similar consequences." But what the Armada didn't know was that they were walking into a carefully orchestrated trap, not of weapons but of conscience. Amar and Kosi stood in the command center beneath Geneva, surrounded by holographic displays showing not just the approaching fleet, but communication channels to 24 species across the galaxy. "Everyone's in position?" she asked Commander Martinez. "Confirmed. Every human colony, every allied species, every neutral party we could reach, they're all watching. This goes out live across the galactic network in 3 minutes." Amara took a deep breath. "Then let's make this count." When the broadcast began, it didn't show weapons or defenses. It showed humanity, raw, vulnerable, and honest. The first image was of Shanghai, where citizens continued their daily lives despite the Armada overhead. Children played in parks. Street vendors sold food. Artists painted murals on buildings. The message was clear: these were people, not threats. The second image switched to the Mars colony, where human and Vrelnian engineers worked side by side, laughing at some shared joke while assembling mining drones. Then Harvest Prime appeared, showing Melnari children, plump and healthy for the first time in generations, attending a school where they learned agriculture, art, and mathematics in equal measure. Amara's voice accompanied the images, speaking not in Galactic Common but in a dozen languages simultaneously, translated for every species watching. "People of the galaxy," she began, "we are not your enemies. We are not rebels or insurgents. We are simply a young species that believes growth is better than stagnation, that cooperation is stronger than hierarchy, and that every being deserves the chance to become more than their assigned role." The feed shifted to show Ambassador Torin Vel, stripped of his rank, standing in a human community center teaching young Kark's warriors the ancient philosophical traditions their species had abandoned. "We don't claim to be perfect," Amara continued. "Our history is filled with wars, prejudice, and mistakes. But we learned from them. We learned that diversity is strength. We learned that questioning authority isn't rebellion, it's growth. And we learned that fear is the weapon of those who have forgotten how to lead." On the bridge of the Eternal Order, Commander Zelmoth watched the broadcast with growing discomfort. His tactical displays showed him targets and firing solutions, but the broadcast showed him people. Families. Children. "Commander," his weapons officer called out, "we're receiving hundreds of transmissions from across the fleet. Many crews are requesting clarification of rules of engagement." "Our orders are clear," Zelmoth said, but his voice lacked certainty. The broadcast reached its crescendo. Amara appeared in frame herself, standing not in a military bunker but in an open plaza in Geneva, unarmed and unafraid. "High Arbiter Salanth, you've given us an ultimatum: submit or be isolated. But there's a third option you haven't considered. We could choose to stand together, all of us, and build something better than the Council has ever imagined." She gestured, and the camera panned to show thousands of humans of every ethnicity standing with representatives from a dozen species. Vrelnians, Melnari, Karks, and others, all choosing to stand in solidarity. "You can destroy our ships," Amara said quietly. "You can disable our colonies. You can try to force us into submission. But you can't destroy an idea. And the idea we represent is simple. The galaxy deserves more than 10,000 years of carefully managed stagnation. It deserves a chance to grow." She looked directly into the camera, directly at every viewer across the galaxy. "So here we stand, unarmed and unafraid. If the Council chooses violence against people seeking only to cooperate and grow, let history record what that means about galactic civilization. But if even one of you out there believes there's a better way, stand with us. Not behind us, not under us. With us." The broadcast ended. On Nexera, High Arbiter Salanth watched with mounting fury. She opened a channel to the Armada. "Commander Zelmoth, you will commence." "High Arbiter," Zelmoth interrupted, "an unprecedented breach of protocol. I request permission to negotiate surrender terms." "Their surrender?" Solent demanded. "No, Arbiter." Zelmoth's voice was heavy. I will not fire on civilians broadcasting a message of peace. Court-martial me if you must, but the Council will not stain itself with this dishonor under my command." "Then you are relieved." "Vice Commander Prelin, you will?" "I also refuse, High Arbiter," the Vice Commander said. "As do most of the fleet captains. We're receiving our own transmissions from home. Our people are watching this broadcast. They're asking us why we're preparing to attack those who've shown us only friendship." Across the Armada, ship after ship went dark, not destroyed but voluntarily powering down weapons systems. The greatest military force the Council had assembled in a millennium was refusing to fight. On Harvest Prime, Captain Shira of the Kark's enforcers received the broadcast and made her own choice. She opened a channel to Overseer Pell. "Overseer, this is Captain Shira. I am officially requesting asylum on Harvest Prime. I will no longer serve orders that contradict honor." Within hours, similar declarations came from Council personnel across dozens of worlds. The enforcement apparatus was crumbling. In the Council chambers, chaos reigned. Representatives shouted accusations and counter-accusations. Alliance blocks that had held for millennia fractured along fault lines no one had known existed. "This is sedition," Speaker Varn screamed. "The humans have corrupted our military, The humans," interrupted Mrixtal calmly, "have simply asked questions we should have asked ourselves centuries ago. Why do we maintain rigid hierarchies? Why do we suppress innovation? Why do we fear growth? Because without order there is chaos." Solent snapped. "No," said a new voice. It was Overseer Pell, speaking via hologram from Harvest Prime. "Without growth there is death. The Council has maintained order by preventing change. But life is change. You've tried to freeze the galaxy in amber, and now you wonder why younger species choose ice-breaking over preservation." For the first time in her 900-year reign, High Arbiter Solent had no response. The galaxy she'd spent centuries controlling had slipped through her appendages like water. On Earth, Amara Nkosi watched the Council feed with tears in her eyes. Not tears of triumph but of relief. They'd gambled everything on the belief that most beings, when given a choice between violence and growth, would choose growth. And they'd been right. "What happens now?" Jamal asked. Amara smiled. "Now we find out if we're ready for the hardest part, building something new together." But she knew the real test was just beginning. Tearing down an old order was dramatic. Building a new one was slow, messy work. And not everyone would be ready to let go of the past. A new galaxy. 3 months after the standoff, representatives from 47 species gathered not on Nexera, but on a neutral station humanity had helped construct in the Andromeda Reach. They called it the Symposium, deliberately choosing a human word meaning, a place to drink together and share ideas. The old amphitheater of the Council still stood on Nexera, but it stood increasingly empty. High Arbiter Solent had not abdicated, but her authority had become ceremonial, a shadow of its former weight. The galaxy was reorganizing itself, and this time, no single species would control the narrative. Amar Nkosi opened the symposium's first session with words that would be recorded in a dozen different species' histories. "We did not come here to lead you. We came here to walk beside you." The chamber, circular rather than hierarchical, held representatives sitting in mixed groups rather than species blocks. Humans sat with Karks. Vrelnians debated with Melnari. The physical arrangement itself was revolutionary. "The purpose of this symposium," Amara continued, "is not to replace the Council with something identical. Is to ask fundamental questions. What do we want the galaxy to be? How do we balance order with freedom? How do we encourage growth while maintaining stability? And most importantly, how do we make sure no species ever feels trapped by their designated role again?" Ambassador Torin Vel, reinstated by popular demand from his people, stood to speak. The massive Kark's warrior-turned-philosopher had become a symbol of transformation across the galaxy. "For 3,000 years my people served as enforcers," he said, his voice carrying the weight of generations. "We were told it was our nature, our purpose. But nature is not destiny. Purpose is not prison. With human help, we've remembered that Karks were once poets and teachers. Now we can be both warriors and peacemakers. The question is, how many other species have forgotten who they could be?" A young Vrelnian named Zilvier spoke next, her crystalline body reflecting the station's lights. The mining guilds of Vraxos 7 have a proposal. We want to establish the first multi-species university, a place where any being from any world can learn any discipline, regardless of their species' assigned role. Impossible, muttered one of the older council loyalists, a being whose species had maintained records for 6 millennia. Educational resources must be allocated based on aptitude assessments. Why? Asked Dr. Yuki Tanaka simply. On Earth we had a man named Einstein who worked in a patent office. By your system he never would have become a physicist. Yet his theories changed our understanding of the universe. How many Einsteins has the galaxy lost because they were born into the wrong role? The question hung in the air, unanswerable and damning. Over the following weeks, the symposium established new principles. The Accords of Andromeda, as they came to be known, established that no species would be assigned a permanent role. Technology and education would be freely shared among all participants. Decision-making would be collaborative, not hierarchical. Growth and innovation would be encouraged, not suppressed. Any being could appeal decisions that violated these principles. It wasn't perfect. Old council loyalists protested that chaos would follow. Conservative species worried about losing their identity. There were setbacks, arguments, and moments when the whole project seemed ready to collapse. But something remarkable was happening. On Vraxos 7, the first multi-species university opened with 5,000 students from 23 species. A Kark studied medicine. A Melnari learned engineering. A human took classes in Vrelnian mineralogy. The mixing of perspectives created insights none of them would have discovered alone. On the agricultural worlds, the Melnari didn't just feed the galaxy. They started teaching other species their farming techniques, creating abundance where scarcity had been manufactured to maintain control. The Kark's military traditions transformed into a peacekeeping force that actually kept peace, not through intimidation but through trained mediation and cultural understanding. Even the Nethran evaluators led by Mrixtal found new purpose. Instead of categorizing species into fixed roles, they became advisors helping civilizations discover their own potential paths. 6 months into the new era, Amara stood with her core team on the observation deck of the symposium station, looking out at the stars. Director Nkosi, Commander Martinez said, using Amara's formal title though they'd long since become friends, we're receiving a transmission from the Outer Rim. 3 species we've never contacted are asking to join the symposium. Apparently word has spread. Amara smiled. The galaxy's bigger than we thought. And it's hungry for change. Do you think it'll last? Asked Jamal Foster, who'd grown from a nervous assistant into a skilled diplomat in his own right. Nothing lasts forever, Amara replied. But that's the point. The Council tried to freeze the galaxy in place. We're embracing that things change, evolve, grow. In 100 years, the symposium might become something we can't even imagine. And that's okay. Dmitry Volkov's voice crackled over the comm from his trade vessel. Amara, you'll want to hear this. The deep space monitoring stations are detecting something. Looks like another civilization far beyond Council space. They're more advanced than anything we've encountered. Amara felt a familiar mix of excitement and apprehension. Then I guess we'll get to find out if our new principles work when we're not the ones with the advantage. At least we'll face them together, Torenvel said, joining her at the viewport. The Karks had become one of her closest advisors and friends. Together, Amara agreed. That's always been the point. Far away on Nexera, in the now quiet council chambers, High Arbiter Salant sat alone. Her 900 years weighed heavily upon her. She'd spent her life maintaining order, believing it was the highest good. Now she watched that order transform into something chaotic, unpredictable, and undeniably more alive. A young aide approached cautiously. High Arbiter, the symposium has extended an invitation. They're asking if you'd like to attend as an observer. Salant was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly she rose from her seat. Tell them I accept, she said. It seems I have much to learn about observation. The aide blinked in surprise. High Arbiter? I spent 2,000 years watching humans through sensors and reports, Salant said quietly. I saw their wars, their conflicts, their chaos. I missed their art, their compassion, their ability to transform pain into growth. Perhaps it's time I observed with open eyes instead of filtered data. As she walked through the empty amphitheater one last time, Salant realized that the humans had never wanted to lead the galaxy. They'd simply wanted the galaxy to stop following blindly. On Earth, in a small apartment in Lagos, a young girl named Ada Okoye looked up at the stars through her window. Her mother worked on the symposium station. Her father was part of the human Karks exchange program. She'd grown up in a galaxy where anything was possible. Mom says there are species out there we haven't met yet, Ada told her AI tutor, a program designed collaboratively by 3 different civilizations. That's correct, the tutor replied. The galaxy is vast and full of possibilities. When I grow up, Ada said with the certainty only a child can have, I'm going to meet them. And I'm going to learn everything they know. What will you be? The tutor asked. An explorer? A diplomat? A scientist? Ada thought about it then grinned. All of them. Mom says we don't have to pick just one thing anymore. And in that simple statement from a child who'd never known the old ways, the true revolution was complete. The galaxy had been observed and catalogued and frozen for 10,000 years. Humanity hadn't conquered it or ruled it or even led it. They'd simply asked a question no one else had thought to ask. What if we could all be more than we are? The answer was still being written among the stars, in 1,000 different languages, by species who'd finally been given permission to dream. Epilogue, 20 years later. The ceremony took place on Unity Station, a massive structure built jointly by 17 species orbiting a binary star system in neutral space. Admiral Ada Okoye, the same girl who'd once dreamed at her window, stood at attention as the Symposium Council prepared to make their announcement. She was 32 now, commander of the first truly multi-species deep space exploration fleet. Her crew included humans, Karks, Vrelnians, Melnari, and a dozen other species, all working as equals. Director Amara Nkosi, now in her 70s but still sharp as ever, approached the podium. Beside her stood a very old High Arbiter Salanth, who'd spent her final years as the symposium's chief historian, documenting the transition she'd once tried to prevent. 20 years ago, Amara began, we stood at a crossroads. The galaxy could remain as it had been, ordered, stable, and stagnant, or it could choose growth with all its messy uncertainty. Today we celebrate what that choice has brought us. The holographic displays showed the fruits of collaboration, medical advances that had doubled the lifespan of 4 species, agricultural techniques that had eliminated famine on 30 worlds, arts and culture that blended traditions into something magnificently new, and most importantly, scientific breakthroughs that came from asking questions that had been forbidden for millennia. But we also acknowledge our challenges, Amara continued. The advanced civilization we detected 20 years ago has made contact. They call themselves the architects, and they are not impressed with our chaotic approach. They offer us a choice: join their perfectly ordered empire or be excluded from the greater galactic community. A murmur ran through the assembled crowd. Admiral Okoye will lead our delegation to meet with them, Amara said. We don't know what will happen. They may be hostile. They may be right that our way is flawed. But whatever happens, we'll face it as we've faced everything else, together as equals with the courage to question and grow. Ada stepped forward, her uniform bearing insignias from multiple species traditions. Director Nkosi taught us that humanity was never meant to lead the galaxy. I'd add that no one species was meant to lead. But all species are meant to explore, discover, and become more than they were. That's what we'll show the architects. High Arbiter Salanth, her voice weak but clear, spoke her final public words. I spent 900 years believing that order was the highest virtue. I was wrong. Life is the highest virtue, in all its chaotic, unpredictable, glorious diversity. Humanity didn't conquer the galaxy. They reminded it how to live. As Ada's fleet prepared to depart, she stood on the bridge surrounded by her diverse crew. Her first officer, a Karks named Veldar, grandson of Torin Vel, reviewed their approach vectors. Her science officer, a Vrelnian named Kix, monitored long-range sensors. Her medical chief, a Melnari named Lorna, checked biosupport systems. Course laid in Admiral, announced her navigator, a human woman named Priya Chen. Ada looked at each of them, feeling the weight of what they represented. Not human achievement. Not any single species triumph. But the collective choice of beings from across the galaxy to embrace possibility over certainty. Take us out, she ordered. Let's show the architects what happens when you stop observing life and start living it. The fleet jumped to warp, disappearing into the vast unknown where new challenges and new possibilities awaited. Behind them, the galaxy they left was imperfect, sometimes chaotic, often messy, but undeniably vibrantly alive. And that made all the difference. The observation post beyond Neptune's orbit, long abandoned, drifted in silence. But on Earth, on Vraxos 7, on Harvest Prime, and on 1,000 other worlds, beings of every species looked up at the stars not with fear of what watched them, but with excitement for what they might discover together. Humanity had been meant to be observed. The council had been meant to lead. But both had learned that destiny is not assignment, it's choice. And the galaxy had chosen to become something neither observers nor leaders had ever imagined possible. It had chosen to become free.